Paul, it is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to delve into this space of understanding and redefining what hard work is, what success looks like. This is a conversation that Ness and I have a lot with our clients in terms of understanding that a lot of business owners and leaders, their business is feeling chaotic. They're on juggle street, so they're getting pulled in a million different directions. They're stuck in the busy trap. And as we've had conversations previously, the default is then, I'm going to work harder. I've just got to work longer hours. I'll pull the laptop out after the kids have gone to bed. I'm going to keep hustling. I'm going to hustle more. And also, I'm going to keep doing everything myself for all the reasons that we can go into. But I want to start this conversation about really digging into, leaning into this definition of hard work, which in your book, and viewers, I'm holding up all the links in the show notes. In your book, you refer to it as the old paradigm. So in the view of the new paradigm and redefining hard work, I'm really curious to know from you, what does hard work mean to you these days?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Good day, Ness. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I think that where hard work, or performing to get to a result, a lot of us, what we're fed, so where it comes from, and what's fed to us, I think, from a very young age is that if you want to get anywhere, if you want to be successful, there's one common thread, and it's to work hard. You've got to work hard. And it's just littered throughout a lot of popular culture. Someone who follows sport very closely, I do a lot of work in the sporting arena. Once again, you'll hear this a lot. What's been the secret to our success? Well, we've been willing to work hard. And so, for me, my own experience was born to immigrant parents. That's what you had to do. When you had nothing, you had no other resource. All you had was really your effort. So that was really drummed into us. And for me, my experience was that I saw my dad work himself pretty much into ill health. And actually myself, I managed to, I mean, my dad managed to work himself into a sort of a sick bed in his sort of 50s, 60s. I managed to do it in my late teens,
Wow.
basically.
High
So, like,
achiever.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I won, right? Well
Yeah.
done for me. And so, that came from this same old adage that I could do it all. I needed to do it all. So that's schoolwork, that's having a part-time job, it's going out and having fun with your friends as you're going through those adolescent years. And I was doing my senior school certificate in Adelaide in South Australia called the SAY certificate. And during those years, I was playing or training in sport 7 days a week. So put that all together, and there's just
Mm,
no bandwidth at all,
yeah.
and so ultimately, where was that all coming from? Paul, if you're going to be worthwhile, if it's going to be worthy of doing, if you're going to get anywhere, you just need to keep going. And of course, as I went into a cricketing career, a very short cricketing career, but a career nonetheless. And then, went into the corporate space and into the leadership space. Um, it is a reflection I've had throughout my whole career, but also when I'm in a room with a bunch of leaders or teams, or even in individual coaching conversations, what will come out all the time, and this has been my observation now over pretty much 2 decades, is that when people are faced with a problem, they have two defaults, all coming under this work hard. What is to work hard? What is it to get the job done? The two defaults are, well, we're going to work longer. And if I'm in a leadership position, I'm going to ask others to work longer.
Mm,
And the second thing that we'll always do is to increase the intensity, which might come under the bracket of actually working harder. But what does working harder looks like? Well, I'm going to pump up the volume.
mm,
The intensity will raise. So really, if you think about it, no matter whether you're in a business owner environment, you're in a solopreneur environment, or a sole trader, or you're in the corporate space, whether that's in a small to medium size, corporate area, or in a multinational, It's amazing that as humans in this day and age, that when we're faced with problems, simple or complex, we still reach for those two levers. That's
Mm.
it. That's all we got. And I'm sitting here going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Is that all we have? And we're meant to be intelligent? Like
Yeah.
I do believe we can do better. So I believe what we've got is a situation where that is something that is ingrained in us and it's ingrained in our society. So we could have a very deep and philosophical conversation around this, but
Mm.
it's ingrained into us. And that's what I refer to as the old paradigm. That's
Right.
been in the ages, particularly in the industrial, sort of era. So in the last 100 years or so, and as we've moved into more of a knowledge working, service working sort of economy, we're transferring a lot of that old paradigm over.
Mm.
And what does it do? Well, it increases pressure. It means that even if we do achieve or we create what's called a high performance culture, that culture just brings in and chews up and spits out a lot of really good talent, a lot of
Yeah.
really good people. We've all been around long enough to see it with our own eyes. So I'd like to propose an alternative to that in what I call the new paradigm. And a lot of it is inspired by my own experience in terms of, firstly, my first thing I did out of school was I trained as a naturopath, and a part of that was as a sports therapist. So I did a huge amount of massage. And so if you're going to do sports therapy massage, yes, being 6'4" and being a big guy did certainly help. But still, if you're going to do hours and hours and hours every single day of that, like, you got to have good technique. And a part of that technique is to be able to get into some form of rhythm and find a rhythm so that you're able to perform and do what you need to do and get a result without breaking your wrists, without breaking your back,
Mm.
et cetera, et cetera. And then it was exactly the same thing that I experienced as a fast bowler in cricket as well, and really in every other sporting arena I was in, that if I wanted to perform, if I wanted to bowl quicker or better, the one thing you cannot do is tense up and
Mm.
try and bowl quicker. Right. And
Yeah.
I experience this now as a very, very poor amateur golfer, is that if you want to hit the ball and hit the ball hard and hit it well, the last thing you want to do is tense up and try and hit it hard.
Mm.
So this is once again the old paradigm versus the new paradigm. And so ultimately this idea of the new paradigm being around rhythm, how can we get ourselves into that loose, relaxed, flowing, in the zone sort of feeling where all of a sudden, and I can actually sit here and still feel that ball leaving my hand and how it flicks out the hand and really penetrates past the batsman. There's so many elements in it for individual performance. But then when we start to build that out into what it looks like in a team environment and all the dynamics around that, that's when it gets really exciting. There is a bit of complexity, but it does get really exciting in terms of, okay, now we've got something a bit more sophisticated to play with. Now we've got many, many opportunities to invest our finite resources into, to be able to then truly get some real performance. And I like to use that term, what's the difference between a real performance culture versus a high performance culture? A real performance culture, which is something that's sustainable and actually enjoyable as
Mm.
well. And we're going to have fun. It's going to be attractive, and we're going to get better results as well.
Wow. I resonate so much with what you've said there, especially about the old paradigm, what I got raised on believing, maybe a bit through my parents or society in general, media, whatever, that the
Mm,
harder you work, the more successful you are. And when you were describing in relation to bowling, or you think about that, you think, okay, if we're going to put the pressure on, I think in one of my early jobs, I worked like nearly 48 hours straight to meet a deadline, exhausted, ridiculously, crazily tired. That whole, where was my attention to detail in that? Why were we doing that so close to the cutoff time? And I flew from Melbourne to Sydney on a plane, got in a cab, went to the tender box, dropped it in 10 minutes before the tender closed, got in a cab, flew back. It was ridiculous. And I think about
where is my best quality work ever produced? It's always produced when you're in flow, exactly what you said. When you are finding opportunities to work together in rhythm and in sync
Mm.
with each other and bouncing off each other, as opposed to feeling completely exhausted at the end of that. So, what is it that helps people to make that shift? Because it's a big shift in thinking. Like, we're breaking a huge cycle here around the way we believe we should be doing business in those times. And I'd have to say I even fall into that, Nikki. I don't know whether you would agree with that as well, but we just go, if we've got all this work on, we're just gonna have to work longer hours, we're just gonna work harder. How do we break that, Paul?
Well, firstly, I'm just exhausted listening to your story, let alone
I know it was
let alone
crazy.
like visualizing you do it, right?
Mm,
And I think that a lot of listeners out there would have had their own experience of these
yeah.
times. And Margaret Heffernan talks about crunch times, particularly in the IT arena. And I think, firstly, we just need to acknowledge there's always going to be those crunch times.
Yeah.
There's going to be times when it's just pedal to the metal, the intensity raises, we see it for what it is, and we just need to push and push hard. I think the key thing, though, is that pushing hard, that high intensity, doesn't just become the norm. And
Mm,
that's ultimately what we're talking about. So the first thing I think in terms of finding this rhythm and finding our flow, and as leaders, supporting people around us to get into flow and get into synchronization with each other. I think the first thing is to really come at it from what I call, or you utilize contextual thinking. So contextual thinking is the idea of basically zooming out and having a look at what's in front of us in our workflows, our projects, our tasks at hand, and just seeing how they fit into the broader picture. Now, this sounds simple, but to actually physically do it when you're in meetings,
yeah.
when you're in the business, this is actually harder than what it looks like. It's what I'd term a practice. So I think when I'm doing a lot of learning and development, something I'll talk to my audiences is about is the idea of when there's a spectrum that you go through in terms of being able to take on things and actually execute them. And we start off by learning something. Okay, learning's good, but then what? Well, any learning needs to then be practiced
Mm,
over and over and over again. So any skill set that we're going to talk about, firstly, let's just understand it's important to practice. And I'd love to use, once again, in sport, you have AFL players and they will still go to training and practice handballs. They'll do
mm,
1,000 of them. What does that tell you? Right?
mm-hmm,
Those basics need to be practiced over and over, or perceived basics need to be practiced over and over and over again until it becomes autonomous. And then if you do things for long enough, you then move into mastery. And a really good metaphor for this is driving. We learn how to drive. We drive so much we've mastered it so much that we get to a destination and we can't even remember how we got there. And
mm,
so, that's kind of a bit scary, to be honest. But,
Eh,
ultimately, if we're going to look at, okay, being in our workflows, having contextual thinking, what's going to help us to do that? Well, firstly, just learn that that's happening and then practice it over and over and over
mm,
again. Then we're in a position to go, right, when I'm actually thinking and looking at things a bit broader, now what? What do I do? Yeah,
mm,
and what do I use? And I've basically broken it into three key areas. So when it comes to performance, a performance mindset, performance skills, and getting that performance that's sort of self-feeding, that's sustainable, there's three key areas. The first one is there's social competencies,
mm-hmm,
there's technical competencies, and there's analytical competencies. So the social competencies is very much about mindset and how I put myself out there and how I operate, i.e., very much in an interpersonal way. The
mm-hmm,
technical skills is really around learning some key frameworks around communication, planning, and execution. And then also I split that into a second area. So that's like the universal technical skills.
mm,
So I don't care if you're an engineer or if you're a footy coach or if you're a cafe owner, you can utilize those key
mm,
skills. Then there's the unique technical skills, which is fundamentally, I encourage everybody, and I do this myself, to around about every 6 months to pick something technical in terms of knowledge in your special expertise area, and go and learn it. So I specifically remember working with a financial controller that's now a CFO, and in the business he was working in, he was really concerned when we nutted it out. He was really concerned about learning some legislation around importing and exporting. And after about a 5-minute chat, we realized the best way for him to learn this was to reach out to a mentor who he had worked with before that was really knowledgeable in this area. He went and forged, had a coffee and forged a conversation around that. He got some references, got some reading, and within 3 months, he had learned everything he knew around that unique technical area. So I just think that's a healthy thing to do, because I know I've been in that situation where you're maybe with a client, or you're, in a pitch, or maybe even, delivering a project, and you're in the meeting and you're going, I'm okay, but I just hope they don't ask me that question, right? And like, that's a really good signal of what that unique technical skill is that I should really be hunting and investigating. So that already takes away a lot of doubt and hard work and all those sorts of things that are happening in the moment as well. We get better at what we're doing. And then finally, there's the analytical pillar, which is really about being able to build, good strategies, good operational strategies. And I do a lot of strategic facilitation at a high level, but that is not where the game's played. The game is played in being able to lay out a strategy from end to end, the why, the what, and the how of recruiting a new person, of figuring out the workflow tool we should use for the projects going forward, for figuring out how we're going to put new furniture into our office. It could be, it really is the day-to-day stuff, which if we practice once again, having a strategic way of approaching this stuff, once again, we're contextual. So we're just zooming out and being a bit more strategic about our decisions. You add into this the technical skills of communication, planning, and execution, and then you add to that the social elements, and you've just got a really, really, it's a weapon. It's a weapon of skill sets that means that we can hopefully, and this is what it's all about, get the most out of our resources. Get the most. And I believe deeply that's what performance and leadership really is all about. It's about being able to get the most out of your most precious, finite resources: effort, energy, attention, and of course, time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I particularly love that whole contextual thinking and pulling back, and so many great frameworks that I know are also in your book. So link in show notes there as well if you want to go even deeper around that, viewers and listeners. And it's Ness, the story that you shared, that reminds me as well of a time when I worked in a PR agency, and I remember getting a cab at like midnight, like it was so late at night, going back into the office to work in the campaign. But that also then reminds me of shows like, I don't know if anybody's watched Suits.
Yes.
I only just started watching it not long ago. All these shows, all these, like, it's glorified. It's sort of like we've learned this definition from our parents, and your story of your personal story, Paul, really struck me when I first heard it as well. And it's not just that, but then there's this also glorification of, oh, I've made it. And, even in my early corporate career, I was like, yeah, I was the last one to leave and my boss saw me. Woohoo, Nikki, high five to me, because that's a good achiever. And so we've got these deeply rooted beliefs. We've then also had evidence shown around us that those beliefs are glamorous, or whatever word we want to, justified. And now what we're doing with this new paradigm is actually saying there's different frameworks and models for you to be using, for you to get unstuck. Because also, Paul, when you're talking about the unique techniques, I love that framework around the social, technical, and unique technical and analytical. And I'm thinking, great. So for a leader, a business leader, to invest in their unique technical abilities, you can't be stuck in the day-to-day weeds. You got to find a way to get that happening
Yeah.
in a way that you can step back to what we call, say, the balcony of the business, to be able to invest in yourself as that business leader. So I see how also the model in itself helps people step back, because when you're prioritizing in the right areas, you're not stuck in the day-to-day weeds. And we know that one of the biggest reasons businesses fail, aside from cash flow and that's kind of almost an obvious one, right? Cash flow, lack of strategy. But one of the main reasons is actually that business owners and leaders are stuck in the weeds, stuck in the day-to-day. So a big message here is, how do we step back to that conceptual thinking? And I think another really important point there, Paul, is around high performance. So I like your reframe to real performance, because what I also know to be true is that, and I deliver high performance workshops and, these sorts of things. And I have had conversations with really successful leaders who say, I just feel like there's so much pressure. When we talk about high performance, it just adds pressure to me. So I think even that narrative, I'm keen to get your thoughts on this around when we talk about developing high performance cultures and teams, which is ultimately what we want, whether we call it high performance, real performance, peak performance, but there can be this underlying additional pressure and expectations. So how do we navigate that? We don't want to remove expectations and standards, obviously, but we also want to relieve the unnecessary pressure for people to then fall into those unresourceful behaviors of working hard, longer. Also, interesting stat, just before you jump in there, I was recently reading, when we work over 55 hours a week, so if we're doing 70 hours a week, if you're listening and you're doing that, you may as well work 55, because your productivity is reduced to the point that you're only as productive as, like, if you're working 70, you'll only be as efficient as if you worked 55 hours. Like, what? Lucky I don't work 70 hours.
Exactly.
It's a
think you're doing a good job, but are you? That is so true.
it's such a big conversation. And so I think the first thing before I launch into that is that we need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So you go to the pub, you go out for a coffee, you're at a dinner party, it's almost like, hard work bingo. When is someone going to complain about the 300 emails that they've got unattended, right? This is almost
my
a
gosh,
badge of
I
honor, right?
love that metaphor.
Yeah.
That could actually be a game. That could actually be a workshop game. Hard. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to marinate on
You've
that.
got it. You got it. Okay, good.
That was an
Store
idea.
it.
But, I always think, gee whiz, people complain about their team. They complain about their clients. They complain about the string of emails, how behind they are on this project, this, that, and the other. I'm like, you know what I think? It's a bit of a cheeky thought, but I always think to myself, how would you feel if I took that away?
Ooh.
And that's what's really uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
So I've just read Cal Newport's newest book, Slow Productivity. I'm happy to give it a huge plug, because it really says a lot of the things that we're wanting, we know in our hearts, and we're wanting to say. Once again, it's an aligned message. And, this idea of, once again, taking industrial revolution ideas around activity, he calls it pseudo productivity. We're putting activity instead of productivity. And so, ultimately it comes down to the old idea of input rather than output. So as long as we are inputting, then that makes us feel safe. That makes us feel comfortable. That makes us feel familiar. The first human need is ticked off. And so that's why people don't actually like me, right? Because I will challenge them on this and say, okay, I hear that you're putting in the energy and the effort and that you care and that you're stressed out and you're doing all this jargon, but there really is an attachment to this stuff. And what if I asked you to drop that and I challenged you on that, and I asked you to then do the real hard work, which is to put that stuff down and then to actually pick up and start to learn and practice new ways of working, which are deeply uncomfortable, but will mean that you can do or you can alleviate that pressure to begin with, and you can actually productively move forward with true productivity. So that's the first thing I would say to that, is that, we're hanging on to the stuff that we're complaining about, or we love to complain about it as well. But then can we ask ourselves the question, what does it look like if we did go from that paradigm to the new paradigm, and how scary that is as well? So, once again, we've got to be empathetic here. Like, we've got deep seat. It's almost in our DNA that we're trying to break here. So, this is not an easy game to play, but those ones that are brave enough to face up to that, and then to get uncomfortable and start to lean into new ways of thinking, new ways of working, pick up new tools. And this is also about dropping the ego. So the first social competency is humility. It is the cornerstone. So being able to just drop the act, drop it. Because when you ask Ricky Ponting, why is it, what separates all these amazing test batsmen and then the elite, the top 1%, his answer is they do the basics better.
It's so true, isn't it? And I think that that's what we try to do in business, isn't it? We do fill our time with all the busyness that's out there that makes us feel important. And you talk about being uncomfortable. Sometimes, though, we've got to do the boring things too. And it reminds me, so my partner coaches footy, and he talks about the fact that the boys just want to go and do, like, they just want to do the physical stuff and the running, and they just want to have like a muck around game. But the reality is they've got to learn the skill and that's what he wants to focus on. And they're like, we're bored with this. We just want to, feel like we're having fun and all. You got to go to the skill, right? And I think in business, we avoid that because it's boring.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the real hard work, right? And I love that, because there's a purpose to that. He sees the vision, he sees where they need to be and the work they need to do. And the beautiful thing is that then, of course, they do those basics. They do that because another word for mastery is boredom, by the way. And so you do it time and time and time and time again. So when it matters, you're ready, you execute, and guess what? It's more fun. You're more successful. Okay, I love that. And
that's so true, because they're winning now, right? They're winning because they're doing the thing, and that's what happens in business.
So
sorry, I cut you off.
I was just going to say, there's an old proverb. I believe it's from ancient Greece, but don't quote me. But there's an old proverb I love around this. Around we train hard, we bleed less in war. To paraphrase. So it's that same idea. Do the reps, and then when it comes to the crunch, actually you'll be prepared, you'll be ready. It'll just be easy. It'll actually be easy. So that's the first thing. So coming back to your question around pressure, I love this question, because I recently came across Dr. Jason Novitzky, who's a sports psychologist, and he gave me the 3 key ingredients to pressure. What makes up pressure? The first thing is, you can only have pressure when you care about something, when you care about the result. Now, what that creates in us is it creates heaviness, it creates weight. That already increases the pressure. The second thing is that I have a desire to do well. Now, we deal with a lot of high performers out there, and one of the reasons they feel pressure is because they want to do good, right? They want to be successful. They don't want to fail. And so we bring in expectation, which you mentioned before. And then the third thing is a fear of being judged. So there's a fear of ridicule, and not being held up and being recognized by your peers or your clients or whatever the case may be. Now, even if that's not true, we do get this sense that we're being judged all the time in whatever our environment is. So you add those 3 things together, and I think that's really helpful for even just understanding pressure in itself. So once we know that, and we understand, okay, how can I detach from the result? How can I acknowledge that I want to do well, but also acknowledge that setting up that expectation is hurting me? So how can I detach from that? And then the judgment as well, the feeling of the eyes on me. How can I actually then, once again, just turn those eyes around and put the spotlight onto the work itself?
Mm.
So this is where, I talk about humility being the cornerstone. So this is very helpful to understand that I'm in service to something else and kind of remove myself, take myself out of the equation. And I love what a coachee of mine said when it was like the first week of the first lockdown of COVID here in Melbourne. And I was calling all my coachees, how you doing? You okay? I remember one of them going, yeah, I'm really good. I've been, sort of leaning into humility like we've been talking about. And he said, I found that I was calling around to my team and checking in on them, making sure they're okay, having functional conversations, how we're going to set them up and stuff like that. And I realized like the first week had gone and I hadn't even worried about myself. And in his words, I was so busy serving them, I didn't have room for my own anxiety.
Wow.
I just love that, right? And that's
Mm.
always stuck with me. So whenever I'm getting those feelings of pressure and anxiety, I take the attention from me and I go attention out
Yeah.
on them, whoever them is. So I really like that, audacity to question. So I'm going to question the expectation. I'm going to question, the result that I want. I'm going to question if I'm being present here right now. I'm going to question the people around me. So let's be audacious to step out of the norm and what's expected of us, to get outside of our own expectation. And then tenacity as well. Just hang in there.
Mm.
My only job is to be around. And that's what always happens. No matter what challenge is upon us, no matter how big and tragic it is, we're still here.
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? And so once again, there's an old, I think it's a Buddhist proverb that's been made famous on social media by Tom Hanks.
Mhm.
This too shall pass, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really helpful. This frees me up all of a sudden. So that judgment I'm feeling, the internal expectation, the burden, the weight of trying to be what I want to be or trying to achieve the result, we can wash it away. We can wash it away
Mm.
really quickly and talk about energy, right?
Mm.
Talk about all of a sudden, I've got space, I've got time, I've slowed myself down. This can all happen inside a conversation, in a meeting, as it happens as well. This can happen while we're performing a task in our
Mm.
office, the clock's ticking, we've got a distraction here. Once again, this is where it's played. This is not about, yes, I'm going to sit in a boardroom. I'm going to think about what,
Yeah.
I need. No, this is in the moment happening all the time and being able to go, shh, lean out, question, 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 and just make sure I hang in there. Just hang in there,
Yeah.
Paul. That's all I'm telling myself. And there's a lot of equity to this, and this can be applied to so many different environments, so many different stresses. And, I'll always remember I was in a high performance volleyball program in high school. And that was my first experience with sports psychologists. And I always remember going into the national competition where there's like 50 courts and there's like, all of these people playing or whatever. And the sports psychologist standing next to me and just giving me a little nudge like this and going, hey, Paul, tell me where all the pressure is in this room right now. Can you see it? Where is it? I kind of half looked at him like, what are you talking about? And and then I go, no, he's serious. Like, where is it? And I looked around and I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Where is it? And he said, it's between everyone's ears out there. That's the only
Mm.
place it exists.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can just do that little reframe for ourselves, hopefully using some of the tools that I've curated there, then hopefully that can be helpful for loosening people up, making sure they're in present. And ultimately, what are we talking about? We're talking about tools that are going to help to knock us into that flow state. And once we're in there, then we can be up to 5 times more productive. I mean, this is where it gets really exciting.
Wow. I feel like you have already told us what our actionable action is in the next 24 hours because that was so powerful. And especially when you dropped that stat around 5 times more productive. So, who doesn't want to be 5 times more productive and less stressed about it? So, thank you in advance for answering the wrap up question. I do feel like we could continue to talk forever, but I'm just going to suggest that people go out and get your book because a lot of what you've shared with us today you go into detail in the book, and we'll put the show notes in with that. Um, so let's just wrap it up though with you just highlighting perhaps a succinct way. And I know Nikki's probably got another thing she wants to say because she normally does. No, but coming back on what you just talked about, if we were just to leave the end message on the actionable action within the next 24 hours to help, break that pattern, break that cycle, how could you just sum that up in a sentence or two based on what you've just talked about?
I think that we need to do a serious audit. And what I love about most of the work, I'd say most of us do, but I'll speak for myself, most of the work I do, the biggest cost is getting a pen and getting a paper, and that's it. So, and the other cost is switching the TV off,
Mm.
put your phone aside, just stop. I mean, let's all be honest. We do have time. We
Yeah.
do have time to just take 2 or 3 minutes out and
Yeah.
just journal down and reflect on, where am I pulling those 2 old paradigm levers? So in what scenarios do I find myself in an anxious state where the first lever I pull is work longer?
Yep.
As someone in a leadership position, when am I asking people to work longer? That's the first 2 things. If you can note down the problems that you and your team are solving through just working longer, you're already a step ahead.
Yeah.
Then the harder one to reflect on is, what are the problems we're solving by lifting the intensity? What are those ones where we're upping, we're physically working harder? And asking ourselves a question, because what I love about the idea of rhythm is that the ingredient is, it's a series of weak and strong regular beats. So the idea is, if we're working intensely hard and we're solving problems through that, and then that becomes the norm, that means we're just in this strong beat position. No good music's coming out of that. So, we need to look at what I'd say then the second thing to do after you've journaled that is to actually contextually think about how your year looks. And this is a exercise I do with most people I work with. Let's look at the year and let's look at our peaks and our troughs. And I love this because I can be sitting here in January and then know that the first week of October is going to be a peak crunch time. And so I love that because it puts us in a position of power where someone will say, hey, Paul, I've got a project coming up and I want to get you and your team involved, and we need to do this and we need to do that, and I need you to be a part of the whole process, and that'll mean this workflow and that workflow gets added to yours. And I'll say to them, yeah, cool. So, when you think about doing this? Oh, in 3 months' time. And I'll say, okay, well, in April, May, we're going to have, this season is happening, and therefore I won't be available. Me and my team won't be available. And, then in October, we've got this event, we got that event, and we usually have this reporting time. So it's going to have to happen in August. That's the only time I can do it. And people are looking at you strange and going, how do you know that off the top of your head? 8 months in advance, right? And so there's something very cool about that. Then, okay, when are our peak and our troughs? Let's start to work through that. And let's work through a bit more detail of all the things that need to be planned out so that I understand what's coming. It's all about avoiding the avoidables. Why would I put myself under stress? Why would I put myself under more pressure than I'm already under? And this, once again, really the conversation I end up having with a lot of people is going through once again, pen and paper, a very simple, easy thing to do. What does this actually breed? Confidence.
Yeah.
It breeds confidence. Confidence in my decision making. It's such a powerful tool.
Yeah. The other thing I love about that is that the whirlwind is going to happen. The
Yes.
whirlwind, the unknown is going to happen. So when you can adopt this viewpoint, and again, that contextual thinking, which has been a huge theme throughout today, then you are creating space to allow the whirlwind to happen without it drowning you, without it pulling you and again getting stuck in those weeds, because you actually have the space. We can't we can be forward think. You know, we always talk about, actually we said this morning, I'm so grateful for my past self. Thank you,
Yes.
Nikki. You know, we can thank our past selves. We can set our future selves and our
Yeah.
future teams up for success, because the whirlwind is going to happen. Paul, there is so much that you have shared today. Again, that theme, that contextual thinking really came up around all areas, I would say, even in the conversation. I love this piece around how do we get into the flow, and so many sporting references, which I'm totally here for. Even I'm
Even
in the story with you, because I got no idea what you mean about the flick of it, but I see it. I feel like I can feel it just from the storytelling. It's wonderful. You know, so much even around managing expectations, self-feeding performance, heaps and heaps of beautiful resources for us to really be able to redefine what hard work is, redefine what success is, not just for ourselves, for our team, for our family, for our communities. The ripple effect on this is huge. So we three here are on a mission, and we invite you all to join us as well to really make waves in this space and lean into the discomfort. It's okay. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Maybe that's an indicator that it's exactly what's needed right now. Thank you so much again, Paul. We're going to put all the details in the show notes so people can come and friendly stalk you and let you know how the actions, you know, what actions people have taken. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Amazing.
We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.